Welcome to At Altitude. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. First and foremost, it was a movie. Fictional cinema, not a documentary. Blade Runner was an adaptation of Philip K. Dick's 1968 novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? The film is set in a dystopian future Los Angeles of 2019, in which synthetic humans, known as replicants, are bioengineered with artificial intelligence by the powerful Tyrell Corporation to be soldiers and work on space colonies. Let me repeat that. 2019, space colonies. In reality, it would be another 2 years from 2019 before Captain Kirk actually launched into space from Van Horn, Texas, and that only went 66 miles above the Earth. That is a round trip that most ranchers in the area make to get their oil changed, all the while screaming at their phones, "I said call my wife, not wall-eyed lice." As with most other AI portrayals in the media, Terminator, Ex Machina, iRobot, Avengers Age of Ultron, Blade Runner's replicants are AIs that look like us and eventually get a case of the feels and then take out their angst on us humans. Now, to be fair, while down social media wormholes, artificial intelligence is portrayed as a tyrannical overlord, and in bumper-to-bumper traffic, boomers like me look psychotic screaming at Siri, the fact is that the actual state of AI is more to the screaming boomer side of the spectrum, but it is getting much better, and quickly. AI packages were in fact integral parts of the computer code that accomplished those Blue Origin suborbital flights and the SpaceX flights to the International Space Station, and they are, in fact, common and seamlessly in the background of our daily lives. Now, when it comes to the use within the military, and the Air Force in particular, Colonel Tucker Hamilton, 96 Operations Group Commander at Eglin Air Force Base, and the Air Force AI Test and Operations Chief, has some things he wants you to know about artificial intelligence. First, while Hamilton believes that hierarchy is important, as seen in the military, the ability to recognize issues and address them is a strength of their culture. He also thinks that adopting technology quickly is an advantage, but emphasizes the need for creativity and adaptability. Hamilton also highlights the importance of experimentation with AI in the Department of Defense, and the concept of failing fast to keep pace with technological advancements. He goes on to clarify that AI is not sentient or human-like. It's a mathematical tool that optimizes objectives based on data. He also feels that AI should optimize human decision-making in the military, and humans should govern kinetic outcomes. Ethical development of AI is crucial, especially in the military, to ensure safety and adherence to principles. He clearly distinguishes between narrow AI applications and the far-off concept of general AI, which is not yet a reality. He also stresses the importance of understanding AI and data, and not leaving the responsibility solely to specific roles or offices. He believes it is incredibly important that breaking down silos and fostering collaboration across academia, industry, and government is essential for AI development. He believes the military must invest in education and upskilling the workforce as necessary for the future success of AI implementation. Furthermore, he believes that AI has significant potential in non-kinetic areas such as administrative functions and should be prioritized, and that AI can help in decision-making processes by quickly analyzing data from various sources. He believes that AI-enabled autonomy will play a significant role in future warfare, particularly with the rise of drone warfare. And in the end, he believes empowering individuals with ideas and creativity is key to staying agile and competitive. In conclusion, Hamilton believes that AI is an evolving and integral part of the military and society as a whole. It is crucial to empower individuals, break down silos for collaboration, and ethically develop AI while upskilling the workforce to harness its full potential. The immediate future will see significant advancements in AI, particularly in natural language processing and AI-enabled autonomy. Now, speaking of natural language processing, I wrote exactly none of that summary. And artificial intelligence collected the sound data from my interview with Colonel Hamilton and then wrote a summary of the key points in the conversation. I was there, and I think it did a pretty good job. But don't take my word for it. Judge for yourself. Let's hear about artificial intelligence and its place in the force of the present and the future from Colonel Hamilton himself. I'm Joe Edens, and you are at altitude. Artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
How do you correct for muscle memory when things are so similar like that?
Yeah. Well, and it actually is a proponent, or kind of makes an argument for being a proponent of artificial intelligence in certain scenarios, because at times we, as humans, want our systems to perform at a very high level with very low risk.
Right.
But at times we don't recognize that AI systems that are enabling autonomy or enabling some function or supporting some human in some fashion, we really just need it to perform better than what the human would do. And so, in situations where a human may have some negative transfer bias, they may be susceptible to being human, right? The machine actually can mitigate those threats because it won't be as susceptible. Like it will know in a situation like an ejection, like that the checklist for in seat kit is ensuring your seat kit is beneath you, compared to a pilot who gets that same part of the checklist may think about, well, seat kit, memory, muscle memory of detaching their seat kit when they emergency ground egress.
And it has the ability also to be replicated perfectly every single time, whereas a human being's response could be influenced by stress
Yeah.
or what side of the bed they woke
Yeah.
up on or what have you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the same, the conversation about autonomous driving vehicles, just, Teslas or whatever's out there. Um, they can have problems, but do they have as many problems as a human? And usually not. Like they actually do perform better than a human, but we don't like that answer. We want it to perform at a, much more extreme, in order to be willing to adopt some of that technology. And it's an interesting balance of trying to get humans to understand and then be able to adopt technology, um, and developing the right justified confidence in the technology. And the best example is automatic ground collision avoidance. So, automatic ground collision avoidance system, auto GCAS, we call it, is the ability of the aircraft system to mathematically understand it's going to hit the ground, like with a lot of certainty, it's going to hit a ground. And it takes control away from the pilot at the last possible second and rescues them from hitting the ground. It was developed by NASA in the late 80s, further developed and ready for the F 16 in the early 2000s, but not implemented until 2014. There's a 14-year gap, and we lost 17 pilots that this system would have saved them. And the reason why we didn't have auto GCAS and F 16s for those 14 years was primarily a misunderstanding of the technology and pilots not trusting that it would actually do what it was supposed to do and not interfere with their regular mission of being a pilot. And once they were forced to implement it in 2014 by the Secretary of Defense, basically said, you will implement auto GCAS and F-16s. From 2014 to 2024, it has saved 12 pilots and 11 aircraft. No F-16 pilot has been lost when the system was on in a scenario in which auto GCAS was made for. And pilots won't even fly missions without it being completely effective and working. So we ask ourselves, like, how do we not, cause that same ignorance to technology, at the same time not being overly aggressive in adopting technology that hasn't been tested effectively. And that balance is where we need to focus as we're developing AI, and especially AI enabled autonomy into our systems. How do we develop the right justified confidence? And then how do we measure it? Is it better than human performance? And how do we get the community to understand the benefit when they may not have the full understanding, or they may not have the data to back up, like, this is going to save your life? Because we were telling those F-16 pilots for the 14 years, this is going to save your life, but they didn't trust it until they started experiencing it.
And how much of that is just the embedded culture of I've got the stick.
Yeah.
It's my aircraft. You
I
know?
think a lot of it is embedded culture. And I don't know if we can afford to, um, I don't know if we can afford to have a 14-year gap, for instance, with technology advancing so quickly. So, how do we mathematically develop a means of measuring system ability, capability, so that we can create a level of confidence that that operators can trust in? And that's important because we have to be able to go fast. And the culture mindset that we need is not, we're going to adopt all technology. It is, we're going to be open to what technology offers us with our eyes wide open, understanding the pitfalls, understanding the science, understanding the voices we should be listening to. And it's the same with, like, an innovation culture is not about creating innovation necessarily. It's about allowing people to be empowered to create innovation and then to adopt it most effectively, or to turn away from failures quickly and celebrate those failures because it's getting you to something.
Well, it's basic science. That's how
Yeah,
science works. It didn't work. Let's try something else.
yeah,
That's the scientific method.
yeah,
And also, the other variable that comes into that, and I think the point that needs to be made, maybe you can make it for me, is our potential adversaries aren't waiting around for
yeah.
culture to change.
Right.
They're saying, this is now the culture. Let's go. And they're throwing tons of money at it and
Yeah,
tons of expertise at it.
they are.
That's kind of a formidable thing.
I think it's a really interesting conversation to discuss our culture and then our potential adversaries' culture, because what has made them successful um, is a disregard to certain things like individual liberties, the respect for international law in the way they gather information, the way they procure things, the way they build things, right? The way they deal with their population. It's against our culture, right? It allows them to go fast. But I also think that our culture has this great advantage of celebrating creativity and adaptability, and the ability to not simply follow the order of those above us, right? And it's funny, you're hearing that from a military person who believes in hierarchy. Like, I understand why we have it, and we've all seen the importance of a commander taking that hill and people following in suit as you make difficult decisions in order to further some objective. But I think what we also celebrate in our military culture, in our Hollywood culture, our movies, and just in general, is the ability for people to recognize when something's wrong and then having a pathway to address that. That is our strength. That they aren't celebrating, that they are too rigid in their approach, that gives us a huge advantage. But it's not a one for one, like, oh well, their culture is great in adopting technology because they can force it, but they're really bad at creativity so they can't adapt, and ours and it's like we're even. No, I think we actually have to adopt some of that culture that they have, which is understanding um, that we have to take certain risks, that we have to be willing to try and fail at, at the military level. Like we need to be willing to try different technologies and see how things work, and that's where this idea of experimentation, I think, is really important for the Department of Defense.
It's kind of a powerful thing. So I'm going to start moving through some of these here. If you were, I just kind of want the background thing because we are at the end of the day kind of speaking to some people who are novices on a lot of this stuff
Hmm.
and kind of blinded by it and influenced by Hollywood's
Yeah.
take on it and that kind of thing that they're seeing all the time. So if you were explaining it to your grandparents
Mm.
who are not computer engineers, who have no idea what software is or how it works,
Yeah.
what is AI?
AI, it's a little complicated because even the definition of it gets into like all these other conversations that I think confuse people. The DoD, for instance, defines AI as the ability of machines to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. Well, the toilet that automatically flushes would be considered AI then because it's performing a task that normally requires a human, right? So I think in general, when we're talking about artificial intelligence, we're really talking about machine learning. And when we're talking about machine learning, we're talking about uh, basically the next evolution of software code. It is software. It's not magic, it's math. And the software, the way that I think about it, the software using data is actually rewriting aspects of it in order to optimize, some objective that you may have put out there for the software. So it is learning in a mathematical loop process. It gets data. Sometimes what we label that data. So we tell the computer, like, these are pictures of cats. And we give it a bunch of data. And when I say a bunch of data, I mean like millions of pictures of cats. And we say, these are all pictures of cats. And what the system can do is it can start identifying aspects of those pictures that make that picture a cat. And so ideally, as it goes through this process, and I won't get too complicated here, but it iterates and gets better and gets smarter. And I'm putting these words in quotations because it's not learning the way we're learning. It's not getting smarter the way that a human gets smarter, but it's mathematically creating um, basically code or rules that it is going to apply to future pictures in order to try to identify if a picture is a cat or not. And so in the end, it is learning and it's rewriting its code in order to optimize the objective that you may have put out there as saying, I want to be able to have you identify what a cat is. And so the same idea, and there's many other applications of AI, probably the one most people are currently familiar with is generative AI, and more specifically, natural language processing. And that is seen through ChatGPT and other natural language processing solutions. That also includes generative AI, also includes generating pictures and generating videos. That is also AI. Once again, you're asking it to label a cat. You're asking it to figure out what the next word of this sentence should be. It's a really fancy autocomplete. Now, how is it able to do that? Well, it's basically learned what a sentence is, a sentence structure. And it's actually, the way to think about it is you're putting in a few words in your chat GPT, and maybe it's a sentence or maybe it's a paragraph, but you're putting in words. And now it goes through its huge database and all the things that it has been trained on, which is the whole of the internet for the most part. And it figures out, based on all of the things that it's learned from that data set of all written, documents, what the next best letter should be. It's basically using math and code to say, oh, the next letter should be an L, and then the next letter should be a T or whatever. And so it comes with letters, that turn into words, that turn into sentences and paragraphs. And it is basing it off of what it has learned through its experience with the data. But it's not, once again, learning the way that we're learning.
Right.
And I think it's fascinating to really think about um, natural language processing and generative AI, and how we twist it to anthropomorphize it and make it feel like these systems are like us, like they're humans and they have feelings. There's one example of, I forget who, maybe it was the New York Times, but they basically started talking to Bing when Bing was powered by AI. And come to find out, there was like Bing had this other personality called Sydney, and Sydney then started talking to the journalist and trying to convince the journalist to run away with Sydney and to leave his wife, and that the GPT, the system, loved the journalist. And people were like, "Oh my goodness, this is like a human trying to." No, it's been trained on data from the internet where there are tons of stories about like these type of systems going down this pathway of trying to be a computer that wants to know love and wants to. It's just simply a mathematical tool saying, "Oh, I think these are words that would make sense as I go down this
It's
narrative."
essentially a mirror. It's just mirroring back
Yeah.
what's out there.
Yeah,
And
from
so
movies and books and everything else.
right.
Yeah.
And so that kind of leads naturally to the question of garbage in, garbage out,
Yeah.
and inherent bias. And how do we protect against that when initial algorithms are being written to
Yeah.
accomplish a specific task? And does that have any bearing on, what you all are dealing with here is kinetic results?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, the development of all technology comes with certain pitfalls that we need to be eyes wide open when we're trying to mitigate and address. That could be anything from, I mean, technology, elevator doors, right? I'm sure that elevator doors malfunctioning have caused death, right? I'm sure that our iPhones and that technology has caused a lot of problems in our society. Now, I'm not saying that those problems haven't been mitigated and it's not worth it, adopting automatic doors on a elevator or our iPhones or whatever it may be. Um, Artificial intelligence is an evolution of software code and allowing us to do things with technology that we haven't been able to do before, just like the computer was able to allow us to do the same thing and make that leap. So, why I'm saying all of that, it's important for us to understand what we're dealing with, to not um, to not overreact to the development of the technology, but in the same breath, really address the responsible and ethical development of artificial intelligence, just like we ethically address the development of all of our technology, especially in the military, from our guns to our planes, to our bombs, to our communication systems, all of it, we needed to address ethically. And so for me, our focus is how do we understand the technology enough that we are able to ensure that whatever we're developing is going to keep our military members and the civilian population, safe.
So, if I were to just backtrack here a little bit and get you to give me very brief definitions of the different types of AI, maybe an example.
Yep.
So, if you were going to describe a weak AI, Siri, or
Mhm.
something like that, to give us a real where we stand with that, what portrayals are there out there in the media that are really very, very far away at this point,
Yeah.
and maybe even address it. Some people have said, that as we increase with our abilities with machine learning, AI,
Mm.
quantum computing, even DNA based computing, that timeline that we have through static analysis, it's like, oh, that's really far away, may actually accelerate.
Yeah.
That these fears are, you know, we need to be keeping an eye on it now. I mean,
Yeah.
even, I mean, people like Jeffrey Hinton have have there was a big article in the New Yorker where he was talking about we really need to keep an eye on this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that the confluence of big data and like lots of data, compute power, which has increased dramatically over the past, you know, decade, as we know, exponentially, for the most part, exponential, not quite, but has been growing. And algorithm development, right, has allowed us to now start using AI like never before. But we don't necessarily know, and this is why it is important for us to keep a close eye on this. We don't necessarily know what those other breakthroughs, how those other breakthroughs are going to influence further exponential growth in AI capability. Right now, AI applications are very narrow. Now, there's usually an AI application that can interact with deterministic software code. So that's how I talk about some of the software. Deterministic software code is rule based code. They're if then statements. If this happens, this is always the output. Deterministic software. There's stochastic software, which is AI, which is you put an input in and it may not be as repeatable based on the data and other rules that are surrounding that system. So you have an AI system interfacing with a, um, a deterministic system that could interface with an AI system. And so you're stacking certain AI capability. And at some point, these AI systems do become more robust and they're able to accomplish more tasks than like one narrow application. Maybe it can accomplish a few applications. And so that combination with quantum computing and other advanced computing capability can change the game. And so we need to be very mindful of what that is, which we also means we need to be kind of leading some of these efforts. And not just as a DoD, I mean, just as a nation. And the DoD being well in tune with and harmonized with those capabilities. That's why our partnerships with industry and academia are so important. Going back to your question, though, a few the AI, you want me to cover a few AI?
Well, I
Yeah,
just want to make the distinction between AI as it exists currently,
yeah,
not in the research or the theoretical
yeah,
phase, but is very process oriented to achieve one task.
yes,
Um, where are we in where are we in reality with
yeah,
that? Are we at the place where we're even getting close to general AI, much
yeah,
less super AI? Is
yeah.
that even
So from my experience, we are nowhere close to anything like general AI. I do not share the concerns of other people in our society that we are um,
and maybe
that is
define
around
that
the
for me,
corner.
just
Yeah. So the idea of general AI is really a robust AI system that can do lots of things and really perform almost like a human would perform. Being able to maximize a game like chess and then turn around and make decisions on predicting and then prescribing actions to take regarding an autonomous system or how to deal with a threat in that situation or then turning around and knowing how to drive a car and how that relates to right this idea of a sentient or an AI system that performs like a human would perform would be a general AI. Um, and we are mathematically not there. Now, there's also this idea of, I mentioned the word sentient, and I'm not sure how some people define, like, you could have maybe when you were saying super AI, you were talking about like a sentient AI.
something that does everything better than
Yeah,
humans?
yeah. And one, still think of AI as software. So we're putting the guardrails in. We're defining how these systems are going to perform and how we are going to be able to govern them. I mean, governance is one of the five DoD AI ethical principles, right? It's very important. Governance is the ability to say, I'm governing you, I'm able to turn you off and on, and I know, you know, how to do that and to have a full authority to be able to do that if and when the time comes. So sentient AI, though, of it becoming its being, I don't believe that is a future. I mean, I understand I could be wrong in how quantum computing or biocomputing and other things could possibly play into it. I think we distract ourselves at times with those discussions, not recognizing that the narrow AI applications that are getting broader are a real concern for our society to get right. And that is, you know, that narrow AI that can play a game. Like, how many different games can it play, and how does that turn into wargaming? And how do we approach, these applications that other people are going to be using nefariously? That's my main concern: is how do we ethically develop what we need to do, and not be um, overreacting to what I would consider an implausible, outcome. Um, and so ChatGPT is not going to go start crashing our, vehicles into each other by taking over our light system in America, right? Like our, stoplight system. I'm not worried that the drones that we're flying out here at Eglin Air Force Base, where we're developing AI enabled autonomy in our drones, I'm not worried that that drone is going to all of a sudden take control away from all the operators and go outside the guardrails of the software to go conduct some, you know, mission of killing people that, that are just in our society. Or it's not going to do that. It's not mathematically possible. So I want to stay focused on what's possible and what's in front of us, while at the same time being aware of what that future could hold and not completely ignoring how broader AI could have broader implications.
So as you started down this road, let's go kind of full tilt. If you could give me just the scenario in terms of the observe, orient, decide, act, the OODA
Yeah,
loop. Where does AI fit in? Where does the airman fit in?
yeah,
What is the DoD's and the Air Force's stance on? You just basically said it, is that
yeah,
the airman will always have the final decision. So where in that, sensors being, I mean, when it first started, when planes first started, everything was just eyeballs and airman's
yeah,
brain. What I see, where I put myself, make a decision on what to do and then do it. Then radar came along, and so that was a sensor. And
yeah.
now we've got sensors across all kinds of spectrums and domains and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So tell me where AI fits into that, getting to the point where a pilot is going to make that decision
Yeah,
and hit the button.
yeah, yeah. AI in the military, and I think writ large our society, needs to be about optimizing human decision making, human performance. Now, there's a lot of discussions of it should it be in the loop, should it be on the loop, should it be out of the loop? Where's the human? Where's the AI? And there's all these OODA loops, as you mentioned, that we kind of think through some of this interaction that you have between artificial intelligence enabled systems and the human. I think in general, we do need a human completely governing, any type of action that is a kinetic outcome. So if there's going to be weapons being dropped, we'd all agree that a human needs to be uh, the one making that ultimate decision. There are other instances, though, where things are happening so fast, and I can think of cybersecurity, where a human may not be able to be in the loop or even on the loop because the attack is happening at the speed of light and the human is not able to respond effectively. And so you need to have the ability for software to react quickly to maybe some type of attack in order to thwart that attack. Now, I do want to make it distinction again. AI is a aspect of software. It's also not autonomy. Autonomy can be an exquisite expression of AI, but they are distinctly different. And the same as deterministic software code interacting with AI is also different. And we have plenty of software right now that automatically, with a human out of the loop, accomplishes certain tasks in order to address cybersecurity and things that happen, too quickly. So we still need to develop now that software with AI aspects of it. I think is the future. But a lot of the AI enabled systems and especially the AI enabled autonomy, we've got to have the human doing what it's good at doing and the machine doing what it's good at doing in order to bring them together to optimize that human machine team. And so for us, that is a focus on what type of information are we getting from a sensor or a platform, right? If I put a drone out into the world, maybe it's not even AI enabled, right? That's where we'd start. Just a regular deterministic drone, and it flies out there and gets information about the battle space. How do I get that information back to the human? How do I optimize that human's understanding of that information? And now, as you start applying AI to those drones or AI to certain decision making, how does it prescribe certain tasks for me as a pilot? I have an aviation background as a test pilot, so how how do I interact with these drones now in a robust scenario where maybe I'm having to manage multiple drones and I'm trying to figure out how to use them, right? Like AI is a powerful tool there in order to inform me what the next best thing could be or how I could possibly use these systems. And I think AI and the human, that team is really important for us to continue developing. But we also don't want to overreact and think all of a sudden that AI is going to go rogue and do something that it's not supposed to. Now, there could be accidents that will happen between an AI powered drone and humans, but that is something we're always concerned about. I don't think it being AI makes it more likely of an outcome. I think it being AI is just an aspect of system development that we will take as seriously as we take all of our system development.
Can you name any specific roles or activities or groups that are involved in within the Air Force and within the DoD whose sole responsibility is the governance and the mitigating of risk?
I mean, ultimately, we have in the Department of Defense, we have our 5 DoD ethical principles.
And could you talk about those? Good.
You have responsible, equitable, um, governable, traceable, and reliable. In general, those five, we want to make sure that any type of AI enabled system, that it is governable, so it can be turned off. It's equitable, so it's not, treating a group of people or something unfairly, a bias that may be in the data reflected in the system that could, do harm to an individual or a group of people. We need it reliable so that it is robust. And if you have um, eh, some type of issue with the data, right? So maybe best example, easiest example to understand is if I'd go change a speed limit sign with duct tape and turn a 55 into an 85 by putting two pieces of duct tape there, is it able to respond and recognize that that is not actually the truth, right? That it is dealing with something that maybe it's unfamiliar with, and identifying then to the operator or to someone operating that system that there is a problem in that one scenario, right? So that's when I think about reliable and robustness. Um, Traceable. Do we understand how the data going through the system is helping rewrite that code? Is the data traceable and the outcomes traceable so that we can go back and say, well, we would have expected some type of divergence of an outcome, but you don't want a like extreme divergence. So is the system traceable as you go through it? And responsible is really just the idea of like ethical AI is kind of responsible AI is what we call that is developing all of those things and those systems responsibly so that we are not putting something out there that could possibly do harm to our people first and foremost, our mission, and those are the things that we're focused on as we're developing any of this type of capability. The governance piece is something we're focused on for sure. When it comes to an actual office, like working on that, you have a number that are really the primary, which is the OSD, Chief Digital and AI Office, the OSD CDAO, the DAF CDAO from my uh, hat, where I'm the Chief of AI Tests and Operations for that organization. That's the DAF, Department of the Air Force, Chief Data and AI Office. And so those two offices, for instance, like the DAF CDAO has an officer who's phenomenal, PhD from Oxford on ethics. He's a Reaper pilot by trade. He is the responsible AI officer, basically, for the DAF CDAO.
Who is that?
Lieutenant Colonel Joe Chapa. Yeah. Uh, yeah, I can't speak highly enough. He's fantastic. And so we have minds like that ensuring that we have the right approach as we're developing our systems. You have the OSD CDAO, which is taking a lead role as well as they should, and they adopted the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, kind of morphed into this OSD CDAO. And they're really focused on all of these ethical principles as well as governance. And it becomes a responsibility that we all have. The problem that we have suffered from in the Department of Defense is we abdicate certain responsibility to individuals because we feel like that's their job and we have no like responsibility to ensure you know that that maybe whatever that job is also part of what we're accomplishing. So let me give you an example. The chief data office, a CDO, is very typical, common in organizations throughout our society and becoming much more common inside the Department of Defense. But at times we create a CDO and we say, okay, that person's responsible for all of our data. And then we, as just other individuals in the greater Department of Defense, don't take responsibility for understanding data and adjusting our own mindsets and figuring out how to effectively use our data, how to protect our data. We have kind of an industrial age mindset of data instead of a data culture that is really the responsibility of everyone to understand. And so while we have these offices working on, and a lot of offices on top of that, from Test Resource Management Center, TRMC, to AFWorks, which is an Air Force entity that helps tie in industry into Air Force needs, from Air Force Operational Test and Evaluation, from Army Applications Lab to the Navy Warfare Center, and the list goes on and on. A lot of those people are working AI, they're working AI tools, they're working data architectures, they're working together too, or trying to build a robust ecosystem with all of us involved. There's the OSD CDAO, the DAF CDAO, who are responsible for ensuring some of the principles are discussed, but it really then it turns into an entire like force that needs to understand like how data and AI are going to be playing a part in their future.
So you mentioned two things there that I want to branch off onto. Number one, because you just mentioned it, how do we keep all of that from getting siloed? How do we ensure that everybody is working together and has an understanding of what other people are working on?
Yeah.
I mean, in a completely different aspect, but one of the things that I saw in Huntsville, Alabama at Redstone when I was down there doing the story was they put in foosball and ping pong tables and the lunch counter where these people in disparate places of opposite sides of the campus working on completely different things would get in there and play a game of ping pong and then all of a sudden discover, hey, what are you work? You're working on that?
Yeah.
That could really help us out with what we're doing. How are we managing to do that to keep all of that knowledge and all of that expertise from getting siloed into one
Yeah.
particular place?
Yeah. I really think that our key to future military success, national security, is breaking down the silos. We have got to collaborate across programs, across organizations, across services, across industry and academia. That is the only way we are really going to be successful as a society. And with that, I fear that we're not doing enough to break down those silos. What we typically see are individuals or organizations creating something that is really a duplicate of what someone else is creating, but there's no conduit that helps connect these silos. One thing that the Secretary of the Air Force has used is this idea of 1,000 blooming flowers. Like everyone's creating their own beautiful flower, if you will. And my argument is we need to actually like take those flowers and put them in like the same flower bed, if you will, with a strong data platform, pipeline, architecture foundation, and then to garden, to understand the landscape and what we're trying to do in order to work together. And that also includes knowing where to prune and where to throw some miracle grow on or whatever it may be. But we need to garden more effectively. I use the word garden instead of oversee or some of those other more negative connotation type words because the DoD is not good at gardening. What we're good at is maybe putting all of these organizations or these ideas, these thousand blooming flowers, into a landscape, and then we would just take a lawnmower to it. We would just create everything to try to look kind of the same and similar. And we're not celebrating at that point the creativity that our airmen and our guardians, our soldiers, Marines, and sailors, have out there. Right. We need to empower and celebrate that ecosystem while at the same time trying to manage it. And that is a full time, like, job of someone trying to help further that ecosystem along. And I think the idea that Redstone had is great. How do we break down? And what I've found is that um, we are not doing that enough. There are so many efforts going on, especially in the drone space, because everyone's trying to create like drone solutions because they're real, they're out there, they're beneficial for a base or an organization. Everyone's creating their own though, and they're not creating capability that's going to be able to scale or be adopted into the enterprise. And so it's infuriating. I celebrate the ingenuity, the creativity, the desire to do something, but we as a DoD haven't done a good job of being able to create really the ecosystem to allow those ideas to thrive. And then also the oversight or the gardening to be able to say, well, we shouldn't be invested here because of these reasons. Let's invest, over here because there are limited resources.
Right. The other path that I wanted to go down to was you spoke about um, kind of your background.
Hmm.
So maybe let's talk about your background in this field, maybe
Yeah.
the MIT Accelerator, and then go straight into what programs exist to upskill airmen so that they can start developing solutions for their own shops.
Yeah. My background is probably very similar to many others in the field of artificial intelligence. And it and I kind of celebrate it because I took over as the director of the Department of the Air Force and MIT Artificial Intelligence Accelerator right after it got stood up in June of 2020. I didn't know anything about AI. And they needed a colonel to be able to take the reins of that organization. And I had a background of collaboration, developing innovative cultures. I came from being an F 35 test pilot and commander of F 35 development. Um, I knew how to work with industry. I knew how to break down silos, right? So I had some background that was beneficial. But when it came to artificial intelligence, I didn't understand what it was. I learned before I took the role, I knew I was going to be taking that role. So I did plenty of study before I actually got in the seat. But I was on a learning journey that a lot of our military members, both civilian and uniformed, are on now. Like understanding and figuring out what does AI mean? How does it apply to my job? How does it apply to my society? And so my background has now grown, you know, um, much more rapidly over the past few years as I was at MIT for a couple of years and I've taken on other roles and I've understood the governance, the strategy, policy that needs to go behind what we're developing. I've also now taken my artificial intelligence experience and married it to my test pilot experience on how do we develop aviation capability that is AI powered. How does that interface with our acquisition process? I'm also a program manager with acquisition background. So how do we acquire these things? How do we write the correct contracts? For AI development, interfacing with industry. How do we ensure that systems are created in a methodical way using the agile software approach? Like all these things, I had this
Did
background
you
in
go
which
through the
helped.
hacker program?
The which program?
The hacker program out in California?
I did not know. Yeah.
We did a story about that. It was very, very interesting seeing how they were employing those agile kind of
Oh,
concepts
cool.
and stuff and
Yeah.
contracting and everything. I was just
Yeah.
wondering if you had.
I hadn't, but that's like those are the type of things that I really think all of our like contracting professionals and others should understand. So I came from this background where I was able to like really get on the step on AI very quickly because I was at MIT and that was my job. And now marrying it to what I am able to do down here as a test pilot and operations group commander down at Eglin Air Force Base. So that marriage has been really good. And now my challenge, my charge, really to my own workforce and then everyone out there, even in our society, by the way, not just military, is to learn about it. There are plenty of tools available, especially to our uniformed members, to learn about artificial intelligence, machine learning, to learn about quantum computing and 5G and additive manufacturing, and the list goes on of all these academics that are available to them. The MIT AI Accelerator continues doing great things up at Cambridge as they've furthered the partnership and deepened it with regard to education and bringing airmen and guardians into an ecosystem, that academic ecosystem, and then trying to connect them back into their organizations. So there's plenty of resources, I guess, is my point out there, and our leaders need to invest in their people, upskilling our workforce. We have to develop, we have to cultivate, we have to recruit, we have to retain, we have to upskill the people that we have in service. And there are plenty of things out there for that, but we need to invest in it. You need to throw resources after it in order to really create the workforce, the talent that is going to be needed, 5, 10 years from now.
So we've talked a lot about, because this is your stock and trade. We've talked a lot about the kinetic kill chain
Yeah,
applications of AI, but just in the general day to day business of being an Air Force, everything that goes into
yeah,
that, from housing to finance to accession to PCSing,
yeah.
where can AI help to hospitals?
Oh, yeah,
Where can AI help us become a much more efficient, close those OODA loops
yeah,
and allow us to kind of turn inside these problems that seem to take forever to solve?
yeah. I mean, I really think your question is spot on because AI is ubiquitous. It's like electricity. Right? It's going to be impacting everything. And the most important things for us actually to develop are not related to kinetics, right? I think the most important things we should be developing right now are those other type of business support processes, back shop processes, administrative processes, because that's where one, AI can really be useful, and two, the risk is just not as high, right? Like if an AI system gets something wrong regarding paperwork, right? Like, well, we learn from that and we can grow from it. But you're not talking about, life and death scenarios that we would be in kinetic situations. So while I think it's extremely important for us to develop AI for the cockpit and for our aviation systems and beyond, not just aviation, but beyond, I think it's equally, if not more important, for us to figure out how to adopt AI in administrative functions and tasks.
So the other side of that coin, and much more, not necessarily strategic, but a global tactical awareness. We've always been great at building sensors to bring information in, but not so great at being able to collate and computate and make that information
Yeah.
usable to the warfighter.
Yeah.
So, how is the development of things like AI and quantum computing going to assist the development of ABMS
Yeah.
and JADC2? And is that going to be an integral part of
Yeah.
that?
I think AI is going to be extremely important for the development of JADC2 because, as you just said, it is able to much quicker than humans and much more effective than humans garner data from multiple multimodal sources and bring it in order to uh, predict and prescribe possible action from that data. And it is the only way we can do it. We can't have a computer large enough that can bring in the massive amounts of data that our platforms are collecting. I mean, F-35 has kind of changed the game in the amount of data that we're able to collect off the battle space. But now take those F-35s, multiply it by 100 of them airborne, and add in all the other systems that are gathering data. There's no way that we can bring it together and effectively use that data in a fashion that keeps our OODA loop really tight without artificial intelligence. And that's where I feel like AI being developed for some administrative function actually furthers our development in for JADC2. Because the nice thing about AI, it also could be a pitfall, is one algorithm trained on data today could do something dramatically different if it's just trained on different data tomorrow, right? So a business function developed today could be used for warfare tomorrow, which once again, opportunity, but a pitfall that we need to be aware of. And in general, as we're developing JADC2 and other type of capability that brings that information together, we've got to one, take baby steps and develop like the narrow applications that are going to be appropriate. We need to tie in all the deterministic code that's going to be surrounding those AI enabled software code. We've got to ethically develop and understand what the biases of the data may show us. We need to understand how JADC2 solutions that AI may produce, how is that going to interact and interface with other systems that are on the battle space? So it's no longer about system development, it's about system integration and development.
We're back to the flower bed again.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, we think about AI development in a few different ways because that is kind of my world right now is AI, as the chief of AI test and operations, AI test and evaluation, especially as a test pilot background. Like that's my area of expertise. Algorithm testing. So we need to test for the algorithm itself. Like, are there issues with this algorithm that would violate one of our ethical principles? We have to develop the system itself. So now I've adopted AI into, say, a high performance drone like the XQ-58, which we turned the AI agent on for the first time in the history of aviation. We flew a high performance drone just 6 months ago, right? So now we have the system development. Like, how does that AI interact with that system? How does the rest of the system, the rest of the software, the mission systems, the other things aspect, how did that interact with the AI to make a fully safe and responsible system? And now, system of system testing, how do we integrate it with the other things that are in the battle space, like an advanced battle management system or a different platform? How does the human interact with that type of testing? At each of those phases is actually important. From the algorithm phase, like how did the human influence the data that the algorithm is using for the system? How does a human interact with that system? Maybe it's augmented reality, like things that Red Six is a company, and there's other companies out there doing it. They're the only one that I really know that's being most integrated into a cockpit. How does augmented reality influence a operator basically in that system? And then how does a command and control node or a commander make sense of all the data that's being collected, right? So there's different aspects of this that we have to, and this is the difficult part that we're not used to. We have to, from the very inception of a program, have this integration in mind so that we tear down the stovepipes of traditional acquisition of a system, development and test. So it has to be at the forefront of the conversation in order for us to develop the output that we really need. And that changes the acquisition paradigm that we have had in the Department of Defense because we can no longer serially create our capability, we have to, in parallel, create what that solution is going to look like, which means the interactions of the people developing it in our acquisition cycle need to actually be more integrated than we ever have been before.
Um, we got to get you back to your life.
Yeah,
Uh, we did some research. We always do.
yeah,
Ask the questions that we thought would address things to clarify this picture, but
yeah,
we don't know what we don't know.
yeah.
So, what should we have asked you? What is it? Is there something you really want to get out there about AI, its status, and how important it is to the future of the force?
Well, the most important things for us to develop AI for use, in the force, um, we've talked about pretty much, upskilling our workforce, empowering our workforce, approaching experimentation rightly. We need the right foundation for those experiments. We also need the right gardening. Once again, I avoid oversight, but we need to understand what is in the realm of the possible. We need to better break down barriers between industry and academia. Academia has fantastic research that they're doing that's uh, front of the line, best in class, and we need to be able to figure out how to adopt some of that into capability. It doesn't need to be kinetic capability, but capability nonetheless. We need to break down the barrier to industry. They have fantastic solutions that we will never be able to create. Um, Decades ago, the military would research and develop certain things. Well, that's flipped, and industry is really doing that. So, how do we im- work with them? How do we quickly assess capability that they may have? And then, how do we adopt it into our systems? And so, it's this holistic integration that breaks down much broader barriers than just systems, but really societal barriers that we've created because we cannot maintain our democracy as a society without learning from what other people have done, which is we need to work together. We need to effectively, now within the law and within, maintaining individual liberties, human rights, and all the other things that we as Americans value, we need to be able to bring together the wonderful ideas of industry and academia and the government to more effectively deliver the future. Um, and we just have not been good at that. What I want to say with regard to our adversaries is that um, we recognize that they don't share the same values necessarily. They come from a different culture, different history, of course, from us, and they don't have the same silos that we have in America. Um, we have silos between academia and industry and government, rightfully so. Right? There are things that the government should not be influencing in a free capitalistic society the way that we celebrate in America. So we do need silos to a certain extent. The one thing that China has is they have the ability to not have those silos, which allows them to go faster in some ways. And so, how do we go faster and meet that threat? Is we need to figure out ways um, to get rid of our silos in areas. Right? We need to partner with academia in order to take the most advanced research and adopt it into Air Force capability. DoD capability. We need industry because they're the ones that are creating solutions that the government could never afford to, or aren't prioritized, or aren't focused on creating. So we need to be able to adopt and then quickly adapt industry solutions. So aspects of our silos need to come down in order to create these conduits that allow us to be most effective and really to meet our peer adversaries' advantage, some would say. Like we can meet that with silos still intact where appropriate, but using our creativity, using uh, our institutions to work together to collaborate in order to create, capability that will be able to counter anything that an adversary would throw at us.
Looking forward, we are in a situation now where it's a lot of test, a lot of, and some people will say kind of an endless loop of development and test.
Yeah.
Where do you see the Air Force this becoming a foundational technology, and how will it affect the force as a whole, and how soon?
I think we're going to see AI affect the force as a whole right away. And that is primarily through natural language processing solutions like ChatGPT, Google Bard, and there's a few others. I'm not trying to support, one company or another, but those type of solutions will absolutely, right now, they are already, by the way, impacting our workforce, from helping people create documents, from helping people think through um, problem sets that they have to get a starting jump on, a topic by going and asking, these software systems information. Right. I think that will quickly, as these systems uh, have the capability of ingesting controlled, unclassified information we call CUI data, as those systems can like accept that type of data, I think we will see even further growth, really massive growth, on using generative AI, natural language processing, to tackle a number of challenges that we have across our force, from managing documents, to creating documents, to creating connections between relationships between different systems, to bringing in classification guides and figuring out what is or is not classified, rewriting those type of guides as well, to quickly scanning documents for um, data that may be useful or biased, or recognizing biases in our documents. So I think we're going to see a massive implementation of natural language processing solutions. At the same time, I think we're going to see a massive um, implementation of AI enabled autonomy. As we've all seen the war in Ukraine and Russia unfold, we're recognizing that it is a drone war. Like, drone warfare is upon us. So how are we going to start effectively using drones? Now, not all drones are, once again, AI, right? But how are we going to be effectively using autonomous systems to help defend our bases, to help defend the battle space, to help garner information, gather, spread, disseminate information, integrate information, and how is AI going to play and be a part of that? Right. So all of these things are happening now. I think 2024 is a year of massive disruption and advancement regarding artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence enabled autonomy. And I think the DoD is really pivoting to embracing what this future looks like. So I think it's going to be a very important, formative couple of years, as AI is never going back. The one thing we haven't talked about that I would love to stress to the listeners out there, we have got we've got to empower our people. They have the most remarkable ideas. They, on the weekend, are creating AI powered solutions, autonomy solutions that our government will desperately need at some point. These are our airmen and our guardians and our soldiers, sailors, Marines. Like, they are out there doing remarkable things. And I have maintenance people that are 19 years old that don't have a degree at all, doing things in AI that I don't even see PhDs tackling. Like, no kidding. That's the type of people we have in our government service. How do we empower those people? How do we tear down barriers? And it's really a message to our senior leaders. We have got to effectively figure out how to give people tools, get out of their way where appropriate, connect them where appropriate, and really adopt their ideas in order to stay very tight with our own OODA loop. We need to be agile, and that is one of the only ways we're going to do it. We cannot do it with our antiquated acquisition strategy pipeline processes. We cannot do it with the bureaucracy that we usually run into with getting approval to take certain risk, right? Our senior leaders have got to empower, from the top, a bottom up evolution of capability. It has to go both ways.
that does it for this episode of At Altitude. Just to cover my bases, I would like to thank my computer overlords for allowing me another day on Earth in order to interview Colonel Tucker Hamilton on the importance of development, testing, deployment, and governance of artificial intelligence in keeping our nation secure by aiding and deterring or defeating any adversary. The At Altitude podcast is a production of Airman Magazine, headquartered at Defense Media Activity in Fort Meade, Maryland. You can find all of our content at airmanmagazine.af.mil, or you can look for us on Divids, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Thanks for listening. Until next time.